We've all heard the stories about Vikings and barbarians. They're the ultimate warriors who put their pride as fighters above everything else and will do whatever it takes to stick to their beliefs. That's exactly what's going down in this scene. The brute with bloodshot eyes is a proud barbarian battling to the death against his own clan members after being betrayed. Cornered on the edge of a cliff, his main goal now is to protect his family, and he's ready to give his life for them. He shouts to his wife, Evelyn, to prepare the spell while he buys them some time. She quickly acknowledges him, and by her side is their only son, Aiden, whom they're both trying to protect. The boy is left in awe, seeing his father fight as the most honorable warrior, battling to the end for his family and his honor. Suddenly, his father is pierced by a bunch of spears at once, leaving him coughing up blood, which makes Aiden exclaim in shock for his father. But this man is one hell of a warrior. He swings his weapon like it's nothing, cutting down everyone in his path like vegetables, and he isn't even breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, his wife begins her spell. A blue light quickly descends from the skies, and that light starts to lift Aiden up with it. His mother wishes him that wherever this star takes him, it'll be better than here. She begs him to please survive. Aiden, terrified of the unknown, refuses to go, but his father quickly calls out to him to spark his warrior spirit. He reminds Aiden to become stronger, strong enough to lose nothing, strong enough that no one can touch him, and to make sure he survives. Tears stream down Aiden's face as he agrees with what his father said. Watching his dad fight without fear, even in the face of death, fills him with pride and makes him want to be a barbarian like his father. The next scene takes us into the back alleys of a city, where a bunch of thugs are grinning widely, ready to make their first victim after the entrance exam. Their target is a rich, nerdy brat they've got their sights set on. They demand that he take off his bag and hand over his shiny watch. This kid is Kim Jin, a third year at GNL High School, and he definitely fits the silver spoon stereotype. Jin-tae tries to stand his ground, refusing to give them anything. He warns them that it could lead to big trouble later, but the thugs just laugh and remind him that trouble is already staring him in the face. They scoff and act tough, while Jin-tae does his best to smack some sense into these fools. He tries to remind them that his friends will be arriving soon and that it would be a real hassle for them. But these guys are not here to take any crap. One of the thugs grabs Jin-tae by his head to slap him hard, but at that very moment, the bastard gets a crushing blow right into his ribs, which knocks him out for good. The thugs freak out as a blow suddenly comes crashing through the wall. The guy who made that hole calls out to his friend Jin-tae to see if he's okay. This dude is huge and jacked, with those same bloodshot eyes we've seen before. It wouldn't be surprising if he is Aiden, but for now, he goes by Kong Kol-do, a third-year student at GNL High School. Those tough guys who were just acting big are now shaking in their boots, asking what the hell he is and how he punched through the wall. Kong grabs one of the puny punks by the collar, hoists him up, balls up his fist, and delivers a brutal smackdown, showing off that barbarian-level energy. After that, both friends walk side by side, and Jin-tae praises him for being amazing as always. He jokes that this time, Kong even pushed the boundaries by punching through the wall. This insane display of power sometimes makes Jin-tae wonder if his friend is even human. Kong gets startled by the compliment and starts feeling uncomfortable. He nervously confirms that he's just a regular human. Well, technically, he's an alien, since he traveled from another world to this place called Earth, and it's been 10 years since he arrived here. Jin-tae keeps saying that sometimes Kong gives off vibes like he's not from this world. This isn't the first time Kong has heard it. His old friend is always suspicious of it, which makes Kong wonder if he's showing signs of being a barbarian. Later, we see a stack of empty rice bowls, and this is the sixth one Kong is tackling right now. Eating more than 6 bowls at a time isn't exactly normal, but still his grandpa is starting to get concerned about why Kong is eating so little. Kong just says he hasn't had much of an appetite lately. He then asks his grandpa why he isn't eating, and the old man replies that he's gotten old, so digestion isn't easy anymore. Just watching Kong put away copious amounts of food is enough to make him feel full. This scrawny old man with a big, bright smile is the most dear person to Kong. He's the one who took in a barbaric boy with nowhere to go and raised him without asking for anything in return. The old man then remembers that he got a call from Manager Park, so he asks Kong if he's made up his mind about becoming a boxer. Kong responds that he doesn't want to be an athlete. His grandpa asks why he feels that way, reminding him that he's won every single tournament he's entered, so it would be a waste to throw away all that athletic potential. Well, that can't be helped since after all, barbarians and humans are completely different species, or at least that's what Kong thinks. He had participated in sports before, but to him, it felt like cheating. He was literally way ahead of everyone, and that just went against the spirit of fair play, in his opinion. Kong doesn't want to let his grandpa down, but as much as he hates to admit it, he believes there's only one path for a barbarian, and that's to be a warrior. It's totally different from the sports that humans play. For him, bloody battles against worthy opponents are the only thing a barbarian is fit for. Of course, he doesn't say anything about his origin out loud to his grandfather. It's just something he thinks to himself. Even so, even if he wanted to become a warrior, this damn Earth is too peaceful for him to find the kind of fights that would let him prove himself in battle. The old man looks worried when he sees some saddening news on the TV. Apparently, there's been some kind of unidentified disaster in Changju, and officials are trying to figure out what caused it. Kong asks what happened, and the old man reveals that there's been an accident in Changju with over 120 casualties, something about a monster appearing. They even show some footage of this unidentified life form spotted in the area, so the government is advising caution. The news visibly makes Kang's nerves twitch, and he starts heading out, prompting the old man to express his concern. But Kong makes it clear that he's got to step out for a bit, and will be back as soon as he can. With that, he departs for the place where the incident happened, and his friend Jinte T is the one taking him to the crime scene. It looks like Jinte T isn't feeling too confident driving his new vehicle right after getting his license, but Kong thanks him for the ride. As they drive, Kong can't help but think about that monster he saw on TV. He realizes that this creature is the same one he remembers seeing as a child, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he feels like this animal might be connected to the world he used to live in. Suddenly, they slam on their brakes right at the entrance of a tunnel where the entire traffic is jam-packed. Jinte knew there was a disaster, but seeing the thick layer of concern in the air makes the atmosphere feel tenser than he thought. There are even soldiers present. Out of nowhere, two sassy officers start chatting about Kang's jacked-up body, snickering as they ask which group he belongs to. The officers from New Song Development Corporation Limited invite Kong to join their company if he doesn't belong to any group. They say if he's interested, he can be part of their team. Kong takes the business card and asks if this is some kind of guild where warriors gather. The officer bursts out laughing, clearly amused by Kang's weird analogy. He reminds Kong that they need to colonize planets, so they're more like workers than warriors. He insists that joining their group would be a decision he wouldn't regret. Kong acknowledges this but turns both officers down, reminding them that he's a warrior, not an officer, and that being a worker would be a disgrace for someone like him. This remark infuriates the officer because he feels like Kong is looking down on them. Kong gets equally fired up and calls them out for looking down on a warrior too. But before their argument can escalate, dark purple matter begins to appear, and one of the soldiers states that it's starting, so they should get ready. They tell each other to gather around. A big system window flashes, announcing that the Apocalypse trial is about to begin, leaving Kong confused. Another notification pops up, stating that the end of the world is approaching Earth, and that the sanctuary planet, Nova, is extending a helping hand to Earth's inhabitants. The system advises them to escape to Nova through the portal. Kong, of course, has no clue what the hell is going on, and he doesn't have time to figure anything out because whatever is happening is moving way too fast. In an instant, that purple energy teleports them somewhere else. At first glance, the place looks quite serene, while Jinte T is freaking out. He starts blaming Kong for dragging him into this mess, yelling and cursing at him while punching Kong hard to blow off some frustration. But right at that moment, a system window pops up in front of Jinte's eyes, saying that their first objective is to obtain 1 goblin coin, and the reward will be novice class advancement. Not surprisingly, Jinte T has no clue what any of this means. That's when Kong spots some goblins nearby, and these disgusting creatures quickly start drooling at the sight of what looks like dinner for the night. Jinte is totally freaked out to see these unknown monsters in front of him, and what's even more mind-boggling is that he's supposed to hunt them. Kong, on the other hand, rushes forward with full throttle toward the goblins. His body is moving on its own, driven by his warrior instincts, which are screaming at him to crush these monsters. The time he's been waiting for has finally arrived, and he's going absolutely bonkers at the thought of finally getting to smash some heads. He's desperate to see just how strong he really is. He makes a beeline toward the goblins so fast that he literally destroys everything in his path. All his inner barbarian instincts are telling him that no matter the apocalypse or whatever else is happening, he's ready to take it all head on because this is finally his chance. Kong swings his punches, taking down goblins left and right, while Jinte T is left with his jaw hanging open, wondering if he just watched his friend take out 3 monsters in the blink of an eye. As soon as the goblins drop dead, they start to pixelate like a hologram, and once they vanish, a coin appears. The system then reveals that Nova's basic currency is goblin coins. It also mentions that the end times exam exclusive currency is non-transferable. The coin hovers right between Kang's palms, and he recognizes that it looks just like the goblin coin the system was talking about earlier. As soon as the coin drops into his hands, another system notification pops up, stating that he has earned the right to become a citizen of Nova and can now cross the portal to enter. Jinte T wonders again what the system is talking about, but Kong doesn't dwell on it. He looks around and spots the portal behind him, realizing that the thing floating over there must be the thing the system is talking about. Later, we see Jinte T's face totally banged up, and he's holding a wooden club in his hand, yelling at Kong once again for throwing him into this mess. Apparently, Jintae has to hunt goblins by himself to enter that place called Nova. Kong reminds him that he can't transfer the coins to others, meaning he has to earn them on his own. Just as they're arguing about it, a monster leaps from its place toward Jintae, but before the goblin can do any damage, Kong casually steps over the ugly creature, reminding his friend that fighting these monsters is the only way to earn the coins. He reassures Jintae that he won't let him die here, especially since Jintae got caught up in this because of him. After a while, they finally complete the quest, but Jintae's face looks sourer than a lemon. At least he's relieved that the session of suffering has finally come to an end. In the next scene, we see a pair of binoculars peeking through the bushes, and a voice asks the sergeant if the duffel bag over there belongs to them. The sergeant confirms it, saying those sneaky little goblins must have stolen it. With that, they decide to kill all the goblins. Meanwhile, Kong has the same duffel bag those goblins were carrying. As he rummages through it, he realizes there's a lot of useful stuff inside, including combat rations, so they don't have to worry about going hungry. Just then, a gun barrel is aimed right at Kong, and the soldiers shout for the goblin to die. But as soon as reality sinks in, they simmer down when they realize it's just a human. Jintae quickly raises his hands in the air and says he's human, begging them to spare his life. Later, they all sit down for a meal together, and the soldiers apologize for earlier, saying they were so caught up in the moment that they thought Kong was a goblin. They're relieved to see there are more people around. They ask if it's just the two of them and how they've been surviving completely unarmed. Jintae explains that they ended up here without knowing what kind of place this was. He then asks the soldiers if they're also participating in this end times exam and if everything in the status window must be true. The soldier confirms it, saying the government is preparing for the end times too. The planet Nova, where humans will supposedly migrate, is practically in the Stone Age, so they need to work together to build villages. Forward-thinking companies and organizations are also jumping into Nova's development to prepare for this new era, and a competition unknown to the general public has already begun behind the scenes. Kong asks if Nova has a lot of monsters like the ones they saw earlier. The soldier explains that this place is like a testing ground, while Nova is the main stage, so training here is crucial, and Nova will be even more challenging. Jintae then hands over the duffel bag and apologizes for taking it. The soldier reassures him that they've got plenty of other supplies, so there's no need to worry. It should have enough food and weapons for everyone. Meanwhile, Kang's gotten quite interested in this place called Nova, especially now that he knows it's supposed to be even tougher. A smirk spreads across his face because he now has more chances to flex those big muscles. He even decides to go out for more hunting, even though he's already passed the test. Later that night, as they push through thick grass, Jintae struggles to keep moving forward while Kong strolls along as if it's just a casual walk. Jintae asks why they're hunting more when they've already passed the test. Kong replies that after hearing what the soldiers said, they can't just sit around. They got to level up faster. At that moment, they spot a high-level goblin perched on top of a tower, looking like it's up to some magical business. Jintae is bewildered to see what the heck this thing is because it doesn't look like any of the goblins they've seen before, but Kong is grinning widely because this is exactly what he was looking for. He'd heard some weird noises follow them, and bam, he's found his next target. With a burst of godly speed, he leaps from his spot, while Jintae warns him about the danger he's about to face. Kong just grins maniacally and says that the more dangerous it is, the better. He charges toward the tower, wielding a frying pan in hand. The nearby goblins notice him, but they're quickly taken out with a single swing of his pan. The mage goblin atop the tower spots the chaos below and sees a jacked-up human climbing up like King Kong. There's no end to Kang's excitement. He's practically radiating an ominous killing aura with each step he takes forward. His enthusiasm skyrockets even more. The old goblin growls in frustration as he watches Kong charge forward. In a flash, he summons lightning from the sky, zapping the hell out of our boy. Jintae goes absolutely nuts, panicking as he sees his friend getting fried, while the old goblin grins wickedly, thinking he's finally got the upper hand. But that grin quickly fades when he realizes that this maniac of a human is still grinning with excitement even after being zapped. In fact, Kong looks totally turned on, annoyed, and a bit freaked out. The old goblin unleashes another bolt of lightning straight at him. Yet this amount of electricity isn't enough to wipe the smile off Kang's face. He can feel the electricity running down his spine, but he endures it easily. You see, not only is he the son of a barbarian, but his mother was also a powerful shaman, giving him an edge that the goblin clearly underestimated. With his feet planted firmly, Kong takes a massive leap, pan in hand, descending like a goddamn meteor straight at the goblin mage. He crashes down with explosive force, obliterating not just the goblin, but the entire tower, turning it into rubble. As debris rains down, we see him lying in the middle, burned to a crisp, yet that wild grin still plastered across his face. He then reveals that he's standing strong thanks to the magical resistance he inherited from his shaman mother. As the dust settles, Goblin coins Bajinte to materialize around him. But this time it's not only the coins. There's also something else. A system window promptly appears, revealing that he has also acquired a mana orb. This mana orb grants him a permanent small amount of mana and can be activated with 10 goblin coins. This is exclusive to the Doomsday Trial. In short, he now possesses the ability to gain mana like a true shaman. The orb starts sinking into his chest, and this yellow light wraps around him, washing away all the burn marks he had on his body. The power surging inside him is so insane that he feels like all his previous efforts were totally pointless in comparison. Right then, his friend comes running over, completely concerned, but his worry turns to shock when he sees him standing there, totally fine, even after getting hit by lightning. Jinte, as usual, asks if he's even human. Our guy goes quiet and calls out to his friend. Kang's sudden shift in tone makes Jinte worry, and he asks if he's hurt or if something's wrong. But contrary to what Jinte thinks, this guy just wants to hunt even more. He tells his friend they need to find the next hunting ground quickly, especially because he wants to take down those shaman bastards who dropped these orbs. Of course, poor Jinte is freaking out about all this, and he begs him to just stop with the crazy talk. Later, they set up camp to spend the night, and once the next day arrives, Jinte wakes up, and the first thing he sees is a pleasant smile on our boy's face, who is holding 3 orbs in his hand. It turns out our maniac spent the entire night grinding and collecting these orbs. He goes absolutely bonkers when he reveals to his friend that he got orbs for strength and perception this time, and he's literally dying to test them out. It seems like all of this is really getting to him, and now he wants to become even stronger. The next system window pops up, showing that 12 hours have passed in the Doomsday Trial, and field bosses are starting to appear in the trial area. Jinte wonders what kind of field bosses the system is talking about. The system clears up his confusion by revealing that these bosses are formidable enemies that novice players shouldn't face, and it's highly recommended to escape as quickly as possible. This totally freaks Jinte out, as usual, and he decides to escape through the portal as soon as possible. But once again, our guy is just completely hyped about the prospect of facing them, and his excitement keeps building, while poor Jinte feels like he's on a hell ride. The next scene transitions to the beginner's testing ground. Field Boss Ogre Jr. there, we see a giant monster, and 2 soldiers we have seen before are trying to aim their guns, but the monster is just too tall. The soldiers start blasting away with a barrage of bullets, focusing on the hand holding the club. But as they continue to shower this monster with insane amounts of firepower, it looks like the bullets are doing absolutely nothing, and the soldiers are screwed. Finally, the club that the monster is holding comes crashing down, but before one of the soldiers can find himself crushed, our guy punches the club with such force that it literally gets demolished. Our guy rocks while the soldiers are shocked. He stands tall in front of this oversized, ugly goblin, ready to take him down. He tells everyone to stand back because he wants to obliterate this monster, and he doesn't want anyone getting hurt. He charges in like a raging bull and hits the monster, but the creature quickly blocks his attack and absorbs the impact. This leaves our guy bewildered because it feels like he's hitting hard steel instead of flesh. The monster retaliates with a punch of its own, sending our guy flying backward. He crashes so hard into the ground that he literally drills into it with the impact. Jinte is left with his jaw hanging, seeing that his iron-headed friend is finally being overpowered, which is pretty concerning. The soldiers are also amazed that our boy survived that punch, considering field bosses aren't meant to be easy prey. You need to be at least on par with a tank to stand a chance against them. Kong is finally feeling the heat and knows it's not going to be as easy as those goblin shamans he defeated earlier. The monster throws yet another strike, but our guy barely dodges it by stepping to the side. The creature starts throwing punches with some insane speed, but our boy just keeps dodging them. This monster is pretty dumb, and its attacks are easy to predict, so Kong decides to use the creature's own strength against it. As soon as the monster swings a punch, Kong ducks out of the way, grabs the monster's hand, and uses its momentum to swing it around, delivering a solid slam dunk. He then balls up his fist and launches himself into the air, landing a crushing blow right into the monster's mouth, obliterating all of its teeth in one swing. The monster's face is now a bloody mess, but Kong doesn't stop there. He keeps pounding the hell out of this bastard's face like it's the best punching bag ever. Each hit is more thrilling than the last, and he just keeps going, unleashing a relentless barrage on the monster. The soldiers start trembling in anxiety and shock as they watch this guy literally pound the hell out of the monster barehanded. Once the poor ogre is down for the count, Kong bursts into a little happy dance after finally defeating a monster stronger than him. The poor bastard whimpers and begins to pixelate after getting defeated, and out pops a black orb, which is kind of surprising. Kong picks it up and wonders what kind of abilities this orb might give him when he checks the stats over his system. What he sees leaves him totally speechless, making us even more curious about what this thing can do. Later, we find ourselves at the portal location. Our duo and the other 2 soldiers are there as well, and the soldiers thank Kong for saving them, But our boy just plays it cool, saying it was nothing and that he fought just because he wanted to. The soldiers give him a tip that before he heads to Nova, he should buy as many items as possible from the shop, because you can't take anything to Nova that doesn't belong to this shop. In the direction the soldier is pointing is a little hut where a peddler goblin is casually puffing away on his pipe. The peddler gives them a sharp and confident look, telling them to just take a look and see what they might like. Both of our boys are quite surprised to see a talking goblin, while the two soldiers decide to leave since they need to go report back. Now, Jinte swipes his tongue around his lips and reminds his friend that they have plenty of coins, asking what they should do. Our guy suddenly gets serious and reminds Jinte that he already knows the answer. With that, both maniacs stack up a huge load of weapons, and after literally buying everything from the shop, they head toward their next destination, grinning from ear to ear. The system promptly reminds them that all the conditions for heading to Nova have been met, and the portal is now open to them. A purple beam shoots toward them, and Jinte feels thrilled at the chance to head to another planet. He asks his friend if he's not nervous at all, but Kong just flashes a big grin and tells his friend that, contrary to being nervous, he's literally excited to the point that he might explode. With that, the arcane purple light envelopes them, and after landing on this new planet, the first thing they notice is that it has 2 moons. Down on the cliff, there are shimmering lights, making Jinte believe that those lights must be where people are gathered. He decides they should head down there too. That's when our steelhead friend gets serious again, saying they've got a serious problem. And by now, whenever he makes that serious face, you know he's about to say something ridiculous. As expected, this time is no different. He's just starving. Well, this time, it looks like the situation is actually serious because Jinte is literally sweating his balls off to hear this. You see, whenever Kong gets hungry, he turns into a wild beast. To make matters worse, it's going to take them at least half a day to walk to the tent village. Right at that moment, a sweet voice from an elegant lady grabs their attention as she asks if they've just arrived on Nova. She offers to help them in any way they need, while the glasses guy stands there with his jaw dropped, ogling her beautiful figure. Kong just stands like a Sigma, with little to no expression on his face. Jinte then asks her if there's anywhere nearby where they might find some food, since they just dropped here with nothing. Not going to lie, this lady looks pretty suspicious, and she points out that even though they claim to be empty-handed, they don't seem to be empty-handed at all. Anyhow, she tells them to follow her because, in these end times, they've got to help each other out, and she knows a good spot for finding ingredients. Both boys perk up in happiness, but their sources of joy are different. Jinte AI is excited to be following a hot chick, while Kong is just looking forward to some delicious food. As they follow her, she points in a certain direction, telling them they've arrived. It turns out to be a fish pond, and Jinte quickly squats down and starts rummaging through his stuff to make fishing rods with what they bought at the store. The lady, on the other hand, tells him to go ahead and make the fishing rods while she goes to grab the bait she left over there. The two of them start preparing their fishing rods, and they don't seem to suspect her at all. In fact, they feel grateful to have met such a nice person. As time ticks by, Kong is getting impatient and can hardly contain his urge for food. His friend assures him that it's almost done and that they're going to have some delicious food soon. The system promptly notifies Jinte that he has successfully crafted a crude fishing rod and unlocked a crafting skill. But it looks like it's already too late because Kong has finally gone berserk. He leaps from his spot and jumps right into the pond. Jinte is utterly freaked out to see this lunatic diving into the water mindlessly. Just as he's grumbling about Kang's stupid actions and his insatiable hunger, someone appears behind him. This familiar voice asks him why he's alone and where his other partner is. Jinte turns around only to see a gang of goons towering over him, along with the same shady lady who seems to have called these bunch of hobos. He stutters as he looks at the massive guys and asks the lady if they're her friends. The girl just snickers along with her goons, making fun of how this pervy glasses guy fell into her trap. Thugs walks toward him, and the girl reminds Jinte that this is Nova, and if he goes around flashing what he's got, it's no surprise he's going to get robbed by people like her. The thug grabs the poor boy, who asks her why she tricked him, to which the lady replies that she hasn't tricked anyone, it's just the law of nature. The strong devour the weak, so he'd better hand over everything he has without making it hard for himself. Jinte tries to tell her that if she messes with him, it won't end well for her, and she's going to regret it later, but these guys aren't taking any crap. They just slap the poor guy so hard that his mind probably scrambles inside his head. The Goonies laugh among themselves at his miserable face and ask the girl about the big guy she mentioned earlier, wondering if he ran away after getting wind of what's about to go down. Then the other guy says that maybe he's hiding in the water because he's scared. Well, this guy is right that Kong is under the water, but Kong isn't hiding because he's scared. At that moment, a commotion erupts in the water, and it's our boy fighting off giant crocodiles all on his own. The gang of goons is left with their eyes popping out of their heads, watching in disbelief as they see Kong battling an alligator. Meanwhile, Kong is thinking about how amazing the ability he just got from that black orb is. The scene flashes back to when he first read the orb's abilities, and it turns out it can help him inherit one of the ogre's special powers. You can bet what this ability is all about, especially since there isn't a single scratch on his body after getting bitten by an alligator. The system promptly displays the explanation for his new skill known as Ogre's Skin, which grants him skin tougher than steel. After giving those gators a proper slam dunk, he hoists them over his shoulder and climbs out of the pond with his dinner finally secured. As soon as he steps out, he's bewildered to see these uninvited guests because he only prepared enough food for two. Jinte quickly starts yelling at the top of his lungs, telling his friend to save him as these thugs are trying to steal their stuff. This leaves Kong devastated, not because he's scared of dealing with these guys, but because all he wanted was some crocodile meat, and it looks like he won't get it without trouble. Meanwhile, Jinte keeps bawling his eyes out, stating that these guys even slapped him hard across the face. It seems these fools just don't know when to quit, so they start questioning Kong and his power. They're confident that even if he's powerful, they can handle him because they have the numbers, but the one who's been barking the loudest is the first to get punched. That single hit knocks the guy so hard he literally goes flying away. This display of power leaves the once cocky woman pale, while Kong tells them to get ready to be whipped because he doesn't just solve his problems. He completely eliminates them, especially when they come in the way of his appetite. Standing in front of the blazing pyre made to roast and cook the tough alligator meat, Kong interrogated the scammers who had been extorting money from newbies. These thugs belonged to an unsavory organization arrogantly called the Dragon Turtle Faction. Even if it was a 5 versus 1, the goons were no match for the Barbarian. They had to choose between being beaten within an inch of their life or taking some unpleasant bruises in exchange for spilling the beans. Seeing as the thug sitting up front seemed to be the spearhead of the group, Kong asked if he was the leader. The thug slightly smiled and simply answered that he was not the leader of the faction. That prestigious title belongs to their boss, the one and only Yahello. He is widely considered the strongest fighter in the area. He has a massive demon back tattoo that strikes fear in the hearts of his enemies. The witch that initiated the scam gloated that Kong and Jinte are in trouble now. She fully believes that their boss is at the apex of power with all the stat stones he has extorted. Kong just listened to the witch ramble while taking a massive bite out of the cooked alligator meat. Since the boss of this faction sounds quite problematic, Kang's Barbarian blood boiled for action. The thugs almost threw up all at once at the sight of the beefcake tearing into alligator meat and skin using his teeth. It was both impressive and disgusting to look at. Kong was even kind enough to give the thugs an alligator head for dinner, but they might not be in the mood to eat something so exotic. The Barbarian simply wanted the 5 to lead the way. With his stomach filled back up, it was time to see this infamous Yongo. The Yong faction headquarters is situated in a clearing in the middle of the woods, where multiple tents are set up to build a little community. The peaceful night was interrupted by the sounds of Yongo faction fighters hitting the ground. If even the small bosses of the faction got taken out with just one punch, then the entire headquarters was in trouble. Kong was just treating these first fights as a warm-up, as the alligator meat in his belly started to digest. He usually breaks down nutrients quickly, but alligator meat was too tough. As tensions continued to rise, the other faction members started pointing fingers at the youngest thugs who brought Kong over to the HQ. Zhongdu, the leader of the thugs, was berated by the elders for bringing such an enemy to their base. Now that Zhongdu and his gang were being treated as traitors, they were practically screwed, no matter who wins. Kong flexed his vocal muscles and screamed a challenge to Yonggu to come out of hiding and fight like real men. He continued taunting the boss and eventually got a lazy response as one of the tent curtains opened up. Jin looked at the behemoth that came out of the tent and turned pale in horror. The boss they'd heard so much about had finally come out, and he looked even bigger than Kong. These are some big grappler bodies. The Dragon Turtle faction's boss, the Dragon Turtle himself, Jae-in Yonggu, joined the fray as he annoyedly asked who dared to mess with his boys. Kong stepped forward to size up the competition. He was quite pleased to see the head honcho face to face, but in Yonggu's eyes, Kong was just a green boy who couldn't even string creative insults. The Barbarian clapped back, stating that being old was not something to brag about. A newbie extortionist is just a 2-bit scammer. Yang did not wait for any speeches to conclude. He immediately went straight for the uppercut on Kang's jaw. The boss complained that kids these days had no idea how this new world worked. This is a place where running your mouth carelessly can get you slaughtered. Surprisingly, Kong wholeheartedly agreed with the sentiment. He firmly believed that in this new world, the one with the stronger fist is the adult in the room. He caught and neutralized the vicious uppercut with his bare hand. Yonggu retreated and laughed in amusement. No one had ever managed to block his punches, so his interest in Kong grew. Since he liked the young man so much, he proposed a bet. If he wins, Kong must surrender as an underling. The boss even sweetened the deal with the promise of a second-in-command position. Kong quickly agreed, but also added his own stipulation. If he wins, he wants to take those 5 thugs who tried to rob them earlier. You could not understand why the strange young man would demand such a ridiculous request. With the bets placed on the table, it was time for some more action. Kong charged in with his muscles flexed. The punch quickly made contact with Yang's stomach. From the sound and impact alone, the power could be felt. Much to his surprise, the boss wasn't hurt. He even mocked Kong for coming in without warning. Maybe kids these days have no more romance in their bones. They just want to get right into it. Jin observed from the sidelines, along with the others. He had never seen his friend's fist get blocked and tanked like that. Yongo revealed the reason why the boss is practically immortal in this place. He has eaten a total of 12 stat stones. To make matters worse, more than half of what he consumed were strength stat stones. At his current level, he is as durable as an ogre's skin. The boss holds that achievement close to his heart. His skin is almost at a comparable level to an ogre's. But then why in the hell are the barbarian's fists still getting through defenses and piling on damage? Kong has never met someone this tough and challenging since his fight with the ogre. Slowly, both fighters started to acknowledge each other's strength. Yongo chose to disengage and catch a breather. Using the space created, the boss taunted that Kang's punches felt ticklish, like that of a kid. But inside, he felt humiliated, blaming the arrogant brat for bringing all this chaos. Yongo charged in while demanding Kang's death. Finally, the final clash boiled down to a direct collision of hardened fists. The so-called dragon turtle started wincing in pain before the worst even began. The nails in his fists that collided with Kang's started peeling off as the bones in his hands got crushed and bent in a painful fashion. While the boss had artificially raised his strength and durability through scam orbs, Kong had the real deal, the ogre's skin skill, the ability that only procs when the user is struck. It's a good thing that Yongu was dumb enough to fight him with bare fists. Kong was literally turning into the Incredible Hulk. He grabbed the fraud by the throat, and Yang Ongu tried his hardest to break free while continuing the choke. Kong raised his other fist and warned the boss to grit his teeth hard for the next attack. If he didn't, he might actually bite his tongue off in the process. The rest of the Dragon Turtle faction saw their boss being pushed to the back foot and wanted to jump in to assist, but a certain someone wouldn't let any funny business happen. Zhang Du and his thugs blocked their former teammates, asserting that everyone should respect a fair fight. But if they still insisted on interfering, Zhang Du wouldn't mind getting his hands dirty. Knowing that Zhang Du is a troublesome opponent, the pathetic role-players resorted to cursing Zhang Du out for betraying the faction. Zhang Du corrected them. He had always been the type of person who pledges his allegiance to the strongest. If he's going to be labeled as a traitor, he might as well go all in on that monstrous Kong. The commotion was interrupted by a flying bag of bleeding meat in the shape of the faction's boss. The big-body meteor was on track to land in Zhang Du and the gang's position. Thankfully, they managed to dodge and let gravity do the rest of the work for Kong. Knowing that he was undoubtedly cooked, Yongo stumbled over his words and begged for help from anyone. Before anyone could come and save his ass, Kang's massive frame had already taken to the skies for the final part of the fight. The clenched fist, which seemingly carried the weight of the world, stopped inches away from breaking the dragon turtle's face. Kong sighed in defeat. Just when he thought he had finally met someone mildly interesting, he turned out to be a pathetic little boss baby begging for his life like a worm. A few minutes later, every supply and valuable item in the Dragon Turtle faction's coffers was collected and bagged by Kong and his friends. They had practically emptied out the base camp. With their business in this place done, Kong had already set his sights on another adventure. Before they could leave, Yingu humbly asked a question. Kong was annoyed, but he played along. No one in the Dragon Turtle faction had ever seen Kang's face around the area before, so everybody was curious about which organization he was from. The question just confused Kong. He didn't have an organization or anything like that. He was just a normal high school sophomore student after all. Even after the fight was over, he was still fuming at the fact that he did not go for the decisive kill to take the conniving bastard's head. Kong noticed Jintei and called him over, referring to his longtime friend as commander. Jintei AI was supposed to manage and instruct the new additions to the team, but was way too enamored by his new commander title. Mr. Glasses over here was on cloud 9 at the thought of being called the commander. With everything settled at the camp, Kong is itching to get some more action, so he decides on their next destination on his own. Jintei can faintly see a silhouette from afar, but Kang's sharp instincts are telling him to charge forward. He reckoned that if they can go beyond their next destination, they can become a lot stronger. Jintei did not like the sound of that at all, because Kang's new target is the dark and unsettling giant pyramid sanctuary. The next day, Kong praises everyone for doing a good job installing the tents. He orders them to maintain the tents and explains that he's planning on going over the river for the day. One of the minions wonders if his boss is already aiming to subdue the new continent, even though no one has ever tried it before. He questions when the boss plans to return. Kong shares that he hasn't thought about coming back yet, and thinks they should return when it's time to teleport back to Earth. His minion tells him the fastest portal is going to appear in 4 days. He explains that a portal opened today. Portals open after every 5 days, and 1 day on Earth is equal to 5 days on this world. Jintei is relieved to learn it works like a cycle. He's already tired and can't imagine himself staying on the barbaric planet all the time. Kong decides they should come back after 3 days and believes he should bring his grandpa with him when he comes back next time, since it's dangerous to leave him alone in the apocalyptic world. He's impressed by the useful information and orders the minion to state his name. The guy anxiously introduces himself as Zhang Du, but Kong completely ignores his words and starts calling him number 1. Zhang Du tries to clarify, but gets ignored. The protagonist begins using numbers to address 5 siblings. They all become annoyed, but are too scared to say anything. The girl calls it and tries telling the boss she has a name, but he replies back with eyes filled with anger and questions if she doesn't agree with his opinion. She instantly folds and assures him it's nothing. All the siblings wish their boss a safe journey. Kong smiles as he proudly tells his friend he acted that way because he struggles to remember names. Jintei smiles and replies he already knew it. As they begin their journey, Jintei is surprised to see the boat his friend crafted. The system displays that Kong has gained experience in crafting. Despite getting more experience, he feels disappointed by the boat's low speed and ends up getting frustrated. He quickly ties a rope on the boat and attaches it with his own muscular body. Jean gets annoyed. He tells him to just sit down and be patient, but Kong ignores his words and replies that he's not able to hold back anymore. The guy jumps in headfirst into the river, filled with crocodiles without hesitation. Jintei is irritated by his behavior and requests that he hold back. The protagonist starts swimming with full power while ignoring all the crocodiles. The boat starts to move faster, which surprises Jean. He's amazed by his friend's adaptability and admits he's nothing in comparison. Jean recalls his friend, making him the commander of the whole unit, and becomes determined to perform better instead of just running away. They both reach the huge wall known as the Pyramid Sanctuary. The system shows they need 2,000 coins for some sort of activation. Jean reads the system instructions carefully and believes he's seeing such a thing for the first time. Kong becomes excited to collect the 2,000 coins and decides they should start moving, but his friend stops him and suggests they should explore and collect coins. Essie, our boy, is surprised to hear this, but he explains that ever since the apocalypse began, he hasn't contributed anything to the team and has been clinging to Kong all this time. So, for once, he wants to try and do things alone without anyone's help. Kong agrees, and they start exploring solo. After the sun almost sets, our boy continues fighting ostrich dinosaurs while finding coins. He begins to enjoy fighting against monsters, but suddenly, a dinosaur tries to attack him from behind. The guy becomes angry and instantly kills the monster with brute strength. After he's done taking care of all the beasts, Kong decides to finally stop as he believes he has collected enough coins. Suddenly, one of the ostrich dragon's bodies starts glowing, and a huge purple ball comes out of it. Kong notices what's happening and grabs the purple bead. The system shows it's a skill stone called Throw. He reads the information and understands that it lets him throw something with more strength or speed. He's happy to receive a new skill and suddenly recalls his friend Jean. Kong hopes he's doing well. The sun finally sets somewhere else inside the jungle. Jean spots a dinosaur and starts screaming to grab its attention. The ostrich dinosaur begins chasing after him. He quickly runs and hides behind a tree, hoping his trap works against the monster. As the dragon closes in, he quickly pulls the ropes, trapping it within them. The monster starts screaming, but Jean doesn't give it any time to run away and quickly uses a dagger to finish it off for good. The dragon's head bleeds out as it finally dies. Jintei is relieved, but realizes monster hunting is extremely hard for him. He admits his friend would have destroyed multiple monsters in no time if he were in this situation. Jintei feels happy he decided to carve a dagger out of crocodile bones. He gets up with determination and feels positive he can hunt without his friend's assistance. Jean believes he can hunt more using the production method. Out of nowhere, an orc lumberjack appears behind him and attacks the boy with its huge club. Despite not seeing the attack coming, Jintei is able to barely dodge in time. He calls it insane and believes the orc monster is definitely as strong as his friend Kong. The orc doesn't give him any time to react and rushes forward to finish Jintei. The boy realizes he's about to die, but suddenly, a stone comes flying at the orc and hits its face. The huge musclehead monster falls down in a single attack, surprising Jean. He wonders who threw the stone. The protagonist appears and tells his best friend to not worry. Kong used a new skill called Throw to destroy the orc with one hit. Kong is relieved to finally find his friend and expresses how worried he was. They start camping in the woods, and as they cook the ostrich dinosaur's meat, Kong shares that this was his first time facing the monsters alone, and he believes he is still not capable of fighting them. But his friend tries to cheer him up and motivates him by saying he can definitely grow stronger in the future if he keeps training. Hearing such words, Jean questions if he's talking to the same Kong he knows. The protagonist praises Jin-tae for his progress so far after coming to this new world and shares that he's a barbarian. So he's supposed to be different from a normal human. Jin-tae is surprised to hear the word barbarian and asks Kong to elaborate more. He's shocked Jin-tae didn't know already and repeats that he's a barbarian. The four-eyed guy is taken aback and questions if the protagonist is from a savage nation. He remembers his friend always performed feats that didn't make sense as a human. Kong asks if he didn't know he was a barbarian. For Eyes doesn't understand how he'd know such a thing. Kong agrees with him and admits there's no way of knowing if he doesn't talk about it himself. Jin-tae expresses his shock, and Kong assures him to be proud of his progress, since there's no need for him to compare himself with a barbarian. He makes it clear that they're both completely different people. The next day, they both arrive at the Pyramid Sanctuary and become excited to activate it. After using the 2,000 coins, the system shows that the Pyramid Sanctuary has been activated. They both receive rewards for the activation, and their inventory gets updated. Jin-tae starts smiling as he sees the updated inventory. He wonders if it's something similar to a subspace. Kong believes compensation is different depending on the number of coins collected. They both receive the Sanctuary's blessing, and their recovery rate becomes double for the next 24 hours. Jean starts feeling lighter and realizes his fatigue is slowly fading away. He becomes excited and thinks he can level up his strength with such perks. He becomes determined to do things alone and believes it's time for him to gain more strength. All of a sudden, Kong notices the army of orc monsters behind them. Jean starts stressing and anxiously clings to his friend for protection, but the protagonist pushes him back and believes he should fight to protect himself now that he has received new perks. Jean is surprised by his words. Kong assures him not to be afraid, as he has a barbarian by his side. He decides to take care of all the orcs alone and suggests his friend handle the one they defeated earlier. Kong doesn't waste a single second and jumps in to attack the group of monsters. Jean tries to stop him, wanting them both to fight together. An orc attacks the protagonist with a spear. He's able to easily dodge it and believes it's not a fair fight if they're aiming to defeat an unarmed guy with weapons. He grabs the spear-wielding orc and slams him on the ground. Kong picks up the spear to make it a fair fight. An orc sneaks up on him from behind and tries to attack Kong with its huge club. He realizes he won't be able to dodge and becomes frustrated. Jean jumps in to save his friend and makes it clear that the orc from earlier is his opponent. The monster becomes angry. Four Eyes bravely challenges the primitive brute head-on. The orc hits its club in his stomach. Jean tries to defend himself, but the orc keeps hitting him persistently. His whole body starts to hurt. Four Eyes thinks he's about to lose his life, but all of a sudden, his body starts glowing, and the system shows that due to the blessing granted by the Sanctuary, his recovery rate has doubled. Jean is relieved to have the blessings on his side and believes he can go another round against the monster. The orc attacks him, but he's able to dodge this time and becomes determined not to give up. Even if the monsters are scary, he decides to live up to his barbarian friend's expectations and stands his ground against the monster. But suddenly, the orc lands a strong punch to his face, sending the boy flying away. He hits a tree, and as he tries to get up, Jean admits he should have been more careful instead of solely relying on the blessings of the Sanctuary. After getting hit multiple times, Jean becomes confident he can see through the orc's attack patterns now. He charges toward the orc and is able to predict the monster is going to attack him with a downward strike. The monster acts just as he predicted. Jean dodges the club and closes in. He aims for the orc's head and attacks it with his crocodile bone dagger, which he crafted earlier. He's able to land the hit successfully, and the orc finally falls to the ground and dies. Jean starts celebrating his victory, seeing his awesome fight. Kong praises Four Eyes and admires how much stronger he's gotten. Jean shares that he's slowly getting used to fighting monsters. He thinks Kang's feats are impressive as well, especially how he single-handedly defeated all the spear-wielding orcs like it was nothing. Kong notices a system notification. It displays that he has obtained a skill known as Spear Mastery, since he already has a deep understanding of spear techniques. Kong smiles and believes he has unlocked a new skill because he was fighting with a stolen spear. He shares the news with his friend and thinks it's the same as how he figured out crafting earlier. He has learned that he can gain skills just by using new weapons. Kong becomes excited to learn more and asks his friend if he has recovered. Jean notices his excitement and wonders if he's already planning on fighting more monsters. The protagonist points towards the footprints the orcs from earlier created and assumes they can find the orc hideout if they follow the footprints. He plans on gathering more weapons besides spears. After a while, they finally reach the orc lumberjack village. Two men beside them hide in the bushes as they observe the orcs from above. They think the orcs look pretty savage and recall that the orcs are the reason why their army still hasn't successfully taken over the continent yet. The men think they're the first to discover the orcs' base and believe they deserve a reward for it. They decide to head back and report everything to their boss. But as they're about to leave, someone puts a hand on their shoulder, startling both of them. Kong reveals himself and orders them to stay quiet. The men recognize their boss, and he wonders why they look so different. The guys share that they're out scouting in enemy territory, so they're trying to blend in as much as possible. One of them believes that if the monsters spot them, they will surely lose their lives. He advises Kong to head back and leave the enemy territory, as it would be difficult even for someone like him to face so many monsters at once, especially the orc chief. The men point towards the orc boss and believe they'll need an entire company-sized force to deal with such a powerful monster. Kong understands what they're trying to say, but becomes excited as he sees the axe in the chief's hands. He gets fired up to make the weapon his and jumps into enemy territory bravely, with Jean by his side. Despite getting multiple warnings from his minions, in a few minutes, Kong is able to take care of all the orc monsters, and as he finally comes face to face with the orc chief, he removes his shirt and advises Jean to rest, as he wants to handle the boss monster alone. The protagonist starts blabbering out the words he heard from the orc monsters. Jean wonders if he learned the orc language while fighting. Kong admits he's making things up and recalls that the monsters have been repeating these words the whole time. The chief screams in rage and finally attacks the protagonist with his axe, but he's able to easily dodge it and lands a kick as well. Kong realizes his kick has no effect against the thick armor. Seeing another axe attack coming his way, he admits even his ogre skin won't be able to save him if he gets hit by the axe head-on. In such a situation, the protagonist decides to just steal the axe from the orc. He grabs its arm and forcefully takes away the huge axe. The orc starts screaming in fear. Kong thanks him for the new weapon and uses the axe to smash its head with all his might. The orc dies, and the system displays that his axe-wielding technique has improved. He has obtained a skill known as axe proficiency. His minions are stunned to see him win and call the Kong crazy for taking on the chief alone. Jean becomes relieved and starts celebrating their victory. The minion realizes his boss is an amazing person and thinks he's more like a monster. The guy becomes worried and believes such a monster shouldn't be left free. Kong stands proudly after winning the battle against the chief orc. The system shows that he has acquired a new item known as the Orc Chief's Great Axe, but this is just the beginning of his journey. We'll see how much stronger he becomes in the next chapters. At the army headquarters, Colonel Jang Miran sat at her desk, her sharp eyes scanning through an investigation report. As she read, her expression hardened. Kong Kyoldu had single-handedly defeated the Field Chief Ogre Jr. during the test, then went on to wipe out Yonggu's gang and an entire horde of orcs in Nova. It was an impressive record, almost unbelievable. A soldier stood at attention before her, confirming the report with a loud, "Yes, ma'am." Narrowing her eyes, Miran questioned why such an extraordinary talent had gone unnoticed until now. The soldier hesitated before answering, explaining that it was likely due to his age. He wasn't even old enough to enlist yet. That piece of information caught her off guard. Quickly flipping through the file again, her gaze landed on the detail she had missed. Kong Kyoldu was still a high school senior. Closing the report with a sigh, she acknowledged the situation and gave a decisive order. A recruitment notification must be sent to enlist him early. The soldier, however, wasn't optimistic. He pointed out that convincing someone like Kyoldu wouldn't be easy. The kid didn't seem like the type to follow orders. Miran frowned, knowing full well they needed someone of his caliber in the army. If persuasion wouldn't work, she would have to consider alternative methods. Just then, a voice called out from behind the door. It was Warrant Officer O reporting in. A smirk crossed Miran's face. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Without hesitation, she called him inside. As the sub-officer entered with a crisp salute, he immediately asked if she was planning to deploy the defense personnel team. Her expression turned serious. The world was already on the brink of an apocalyptic crisis. If Kyoldu wouldn't come willingly, then they had no choice. They would have to bring him in by force. Warrant Officer O didn't flinch. Standing straight, he acknowledged the order without hesitation. The scene shifted. Somewhere else, Kong Kyoldu and his crew lounged together. One of his lackeys, a black-haired guy, spoke up, declaring that Kyoldu was practically the hero of Changjanova. Kyoldu himself only chuckled at the statement. Leaning back, he remarked that it had been a long time since he returned to Earth. And damn, it felt good to be back. As the group chatted among themselves, their conversation was abruptly cut short by the arrival of a female soldier. With a sharp gaze, she scanned the group before demanding to know which one of them was Kong Kyoldu. She introduced herself as Second Lieutenant Choi Sunga and stated that she had a proposal from the army. Protagonist barely reacted, simply asking what the hell the proposal was. Meanwhile, one of his friends found her ridiculously attractive, but wisely kept his thoughts to himself. Sunga, keeping it professional, got straight to the point. She had heard about his insane feats in Nova, and that was exactly why she was here. But protagonist, as if she hadn't even spoken, ignored her completely and turned to Jin-tae, casually telling him they should leave. Sunga's expression hardened as frustration bubbled up inside her. She called out for him to wait, completely stunned that she had just been flat-out ignored. Clenching her jaw, she quickly added that she wasn't here just for small talk. She was offering him a damn officer position. Jin-tae, surprised, noted that they weren't even talking about a sub-officer role, but straight up making him an officer. But Kyolda didn't even think twice before brushing it off, saying he wasn't interested. Sunga looked ready to explode, but before she could say anything, another officer stepped in, placing a hand on her shoulder. With an irritating smirk, he told her that he had warned her. Someone like Kyolda wouldn't just roll over and accept so easily. Then, turning his gaze toward protagonist, he let out a scoff and called him an uneducated high school brat. Before Kyolda could even process the insult, the officer suddenly lashed out with a kick, aiming to catch him off guard. But instead of getting knocked back, Kyolda instinctively raised his forearm, blocking the attack with a grin. The officer smirked, asking if maybe now he was ready to talk. Without waiting for a response, he struck again, this time landing a brutal kick to protagonist's stomach, sending him staggering backward. Doubling over slightly, Kyolda let out a sharp breath, his stomach throbbing from the impact. Shit, this guy was strong. Fast, too. The officer, still as composed as ever, told him that his cocky little antics wouldn't work here. Compared to the real monsters in Nova Soul, he was nothing but a small fish. Hearing that name, Nova Soul, protagonist's eyes narrowed. What the hell was that? While still recovering from the blow, he processed the officer's next words. The bastard was going on about how he should accept the sacred duty of military service, adding that if he enlisted under his command, he'd personally help him grow stronger. A thrill ran through protagonist's veins. As expected, all the real strong ones were in Nova. He knew that if he had fought this guy before, he would have been completely wrecked. But after getting stronger in Nova, things are different now. The officer smirked, asking if he was finally ready to enlist, but Kyolda simply straightened up, cracking his neck. He coolly remarked that the officer seemed to be someone important in Nova, then, with unwavering confidence, declared that he would go all out in this fight. But if he won, he wasn't enlisting. The officer's grin widened. This dumbass really thought he had a chance. Steadying his stance, he told Kyolda to bring it on, but warned him that he might regret it later. Without hesitation, like a goddamn madman, Kyolda lunged forward, launching a flurry of powerful punches. The officer held his ground, blocking each one, but with every hit, a sharp pain spread through his arms. He quickly realized that something wasn't right. This wasn't just some reckless brawler throwing wild punches. Protagonist's strength was real. As the relentless assault continued, the officer found himself stepping back, his arms throbbing and completely bruised. What the hell was going on? He had heard that this guy had only been to Nova once. So who the hell was he really? Observing the protagonist's fighting stance, the officer found no openings for a counterattack. Yet, his pride refused to let him back down. As the protagonist threw a punch, the officer barely managed to dodge, and in that brief moment, he seized the opportunity to launch his first attack. Convinced there was no way he could lose, he struck forward, only to be met with a devastating counter. The protagonist's fist slammed into his torso, sending him flying backward and breaking his nose in the process. His subordinates erupted in cheers, celebrating his crushing victory. Meanwhile, the female lieutenant rushed to the officer, who was writhing on the ground in pain. Cracking his knuckles, the protagonist casually remarked that it was a decent fight, but the officer could only groan in agony. As he turned to leave, he simply stated that they would meet again somewhere in Nova. The warrant officer, still clutching his face and visibly pissed, was asked by the lieutenant if he was actually crying. Removing his hand, he suddenly burst into laughter, admitting that keeping up this act was getting too embarrassing. With the lieutenant's help, he stumbled away, but not before vowing to remember the name, Kong Kyolda. Back at the protagonist's home, his grandfather wasted no time getting to the point. Was it really true? Was the world really going to end, just as the protagonist had said? Without even pausing his meal, the protagonist told him not to worry. His grandfather eyed the orc chief's axe resting nearby, his expression shifting. As much as he wanted to deny it, it was hard not to believe him. Seizing the moment, the protagonist urged his grandfather to come with him to Nova. But the old man simply smiled and shook his head, saying he was glad the protagonist had found his path, but he intended to stay here until the end. Curious, the protagonist asked why he refused to go. Taking a long swig, his grandfather countered with a question of his own. How much time did the protagonist think he had left? Adapting to a new place wasn't easy for an old man. The protagonist sighed, knowing there was truth in his words. A world as dangerous and unpredictable as Nova wouldn't suit someone like his grandfather, and a test to enter Nova alone would be overwhelming. But he refused to give up. He resolved to return once he had become stronger and asked his grandfather to promise that he would come with him later. Before the old man could respond, his ears twitched at the sound of someone approaching. The protagonist, still chewing his food, nonchalantly mentioned that they had already arrived. Moments later, Jinte stepped inside. Without wasting time, the protagonist asked what he had discovered regarding Nova. Jinte explained that all information about Nova had been disguised as a matter of national emergency. The authorities were clearly trying to prevent chaos by blocking the media, a perfect setup for those who already had access to the truth to get ahead. Impressed by this rare moment of insight from the protagonist, Jinte recalled what the soldier they had fought mentioned about Nova Soul. Apparently, Changju wasn't the only place where Nova portals had appeared. Multiple portals connecting to different regions in Nova had opened across various locations, and those in government and major corporations had already begun developing them. The most notable was Nova Soul, accessible through the Payu portal, a government-controlled area that had been operational for 2 years now. The protagonist, stunned by the revelation, realized that 2 years in their world equated to 10 years in Nova time. That meant whatever resided in Nova Soul had already been growing stronger for a decade. He could only imagine the kinds of powerful enemies waiting for them there. Jinte nodded in agreement, noting that while Nova Soul would be brutal, it was also the perfect place for growth. However, the rewards for first activations in new areas, like Chanjanova, were probably long gone. The protagonist made up his mind. Staying on a new continent had been fun, but if Nova Soul was more advanced, they'd only fall behind by staying here. Better equipment, stronger foes, it was the perfect place to push forward. Jinte, once again impressed, couldn't help but acknowledge the logic behind the decision. Without hesitation, the protagonist stood, suggesting they leave soon. Jinte, however, hesitated before admitting that his car had been confiscated. Smirking, the protagonist simply said there was always a way. And sure enough, before long, they were hitching a ride with one of the protagonist's subordinates. Number 1, sitting up front, casually mentioned that Nova Soul was a good choice. The protagonist, glancing back, asked if they really wanted to follow him. While they were eager to, the minions admitted they had to tie up some loose ends with the Turtle Dragon faction first. He understood and told them to take care of their business. They'd meet again soon enough. Number 5, a girl sitting nearby, voiced her concern. Would he be okay? The place was managed by the army, and the last soldier he knocked out seemed to be someone important. The protagonist simply smirked, exuding pure confidence. If anyone got in their way, they'd just take them down. She chuckled, calling him tough. After a long journey, as night finally fell, Jinte gazed out the window. In the distance, towering over everything, stood the massive Payu portal, also known as Nova Soul. Turning to the protagonist, he asked what he thought of it. The protagonist, unfazed, simply shrugged. As long as they could grow stronger, he didn't care. And upon stepping through the portal, Jinte was astonished by the dramatic transformation Soul had undergone in just a decade. As he observed the bustling marketplace, he was awestruck by the grandeur of the lively scene, which resembled the era of the Joseon dynasty. Standing beside him, Kong shared the same sentiment, admitting that the reality before them exceeded even his wildest imagination. Just then, a sudden scream for help shattered the vibrant atmosphere, filling the air with panic. A terrified woman, her face drained of color, pointed toward a man dressed in deep black robes, gripping a sharp ninja sword that made him look like an actual ninja. Both Kong and Jinte were taken aback by the sudden commotion. As Kong turned his head, he noticed that some unsavory individuals were also present in the area. However, the ninja-like thief was still running swiftly and shouted at Kong to step aside. Before the thief could say anything further, Kong swiftly swung his massive hand, striking the thief's face and slamming him to the ground. Holding him firmly, Kong boldly declared that he would soon take control of New Soul. The scene then shifted to a small hut where Jinte and Kong sat at a table, waiting for their meal. The same woman they had helped earlier approached, bringing food for them. Jinte, who was famished, was stunned at the sight of the meal, as if he hadn't seen such food in centuries. The aroma of the soup and rice left him speechless. Kong, too, had a broad smile on his face. The woman expressed her gratitude, explaining that if not for their help, she would have lost an entire month's earnings. Kong picked up his bowl of rice and soup and casually told her that he was now going to enjoy his meal. Jin-tae, overcome with hunger, felt the true joy of experiencing civilization once again. However, as he stared at the food before him, emotions overwhelmed him, and he began crying like a child. The sight reminded him of the uncooked crocodile he had once been forced to eat. Meanwhile, Giant Kong had already devoured 6 bowls and was now focused on cleaning his teeth. Watching in disbelief, Jin-tae couldn't help but question how Kong was able to consume such an enormous amount of food. Just then, the woman returned with more food and informed them that today's meal was on the house. Hearing this, Kong nonchalantly told her that he had only done what any normal person would. He reassured her that if anyone troubled her again, she should not hesitate to seek his help. Without wasting another second, Kong dove into his meal like a starving beast, continuously praising the food. The woman, though already exasperated by Kang's appetite, could only smile. During this time, Jin-tae observed that despite the presence of guards in the village, looters were taking advantage of the chaos. Curious, he asked the woman about it. She explained that with Seoul's growing population, merciless criminals were preying on the weak and vulnerable, creating a cruel world where only the strongest or the smartest could survive. Upon hearing this, Kang's expression darkened, and with a menacing look, he made a shocking declaration. This situation was beneficial to him. According to him, the increasing number of criminals meant more prey for him to hunt. He confidently stated that from now on, the bad guys would become his prey. His eagerness to unleash his wrath on them was almost palpable. The woman, however, merely laughed off Kang's bold claim and told him it wouldn't be that simple. She advised them to be cautious and suggested using appraisal before engaging in any fights. Intrigued, Kong asked what appraisal meant. Seeing their curiosity, the woman explained that appraisal was an important skill obtained by capturing an eagle owl in hunting grounds. It allowed one to assess the abilities of others. Hearing this, both Jin-tae and Kong became excited. Jin-tae eagerly asked if this skill would let him track his own growth, something he found absolutely amazing. Kong, already itching to get started, could barely contain his impatience. His eyes sparkled as he turned to the woman and asked if they could leave immediately. Just as they were about to head out, the woman stopped them and gave them a questioning look. She pointed at their plain clothes and lack of weapons before reminding them that the path ahead was dangerous. They needed proper preparation before setting out. A while later, Kong was seen wearing gleaming brown armor. It was clear that both of them were now ready for battle. As they walked through the crowded marketplace, Kong remarked to Jin-tae that the leather workshop's armor was quite effective. However, Jin-tae pointed out that they still needed weapons. With that in mind, they soon arrived at a place called Yongo Workshop. Jin-tae informed Kong that this was the very blacksmith shop recommended by the woman. Standing outside, they examined the shop while Jin-tae curiously surveyed the area, eager to see what the famous craftsman looked like. Just then, a disheveled man holding a bottle of alcohol approached them from behind. He looked like a homeless beggar and asked what they were looking for. Kong replied that they had come to buy weapons. However, Jin-tae was put off by the strong smell of alcohol coming from a man and began wondering if this was really the craftsman they had heard about. The drunk man, swaying as he walked past them, dismissed their presence, telling them to leave since he had no interest in them. Quickly, Jin-tae asked about a custom order, as they had heard that he could craft any type of weapon. The drunk craftsman hesitated for a moment before turning toward them. His face was red, as if he had suddenly taken a liking to Jin-tae. With a slurred voice, he called Jin-tae a good person but doubted that he even knew the truth, that the blacksmiths of New Seoul had not been working for a long time. Kong, now serious, asked for the reason behind this. The craftsman, still unsteady on his feet, explained that finding iron these days was harder than finding gold since the Abongsan iron mine had been taken over by bandits. Kang's eyes narrowed as he asked if they were just ordinary thieves. But it quickly became evident that they were not just common criminals. They were on an entirely different level. These bandits were part of a high-ranking organized crime syndicate. New Seoul's underworld was dominated by 3 powerful figures known as the Three Hands. Among them, one of the most dangerous was Jang Ho-chul, the ruthless leader of the bandits at Mount Abongsan. His terrifying reputation was as immovable as the mountain he controlled. The craftsman further explained that these were not just petty thieves, but merciless killers whose strength was so immense that even the military struggled to defeat them. He warned that if a conflict erupted, New Seoul would suffer great destruction, throwing the city into chaos. Suddenly, Kong drew his impressive weapon and declared that this was getting even more interesting. He then asked the craftsman, if they got rid of Jang Ho Chul, would he forge weapons for them? The craftsman was left completely speechless. His eyes locked onto Kang's weapon. It was none other than the great axe of the orc chief. Shocked, he immediately asked where Kong had obtained such a rare weapon. But Kong dismissed the question, demanding a straight answer instead. After a moment of hesitation, the craftsman finally admitted that if he could focus on his craft again, he would be willing to forge any weapon for them. Deep inside, however, he wondered, are these boys really planning to face such dangerous men? With a bright grin, Kong told the drunken craftsman to sober up because once they wiped out the bandits, he would return to get the best weapons made for himself. With that, Kong and Jin-tae set off on their journey. As they walked, Jin-tae questioned Kong. If he already had that massive axe, why did he need more weapons? Kong explained that the more diverse his weapon collection, the better he would perform in battle. Different prey required different combat styles. It was all about preparation. Jin-tae surveyed the area, feeling a bit uneasy. His face showed traces of doubt as he wondered if they would even find anything to hunt here. The place was already filled with hunters, and the competition was intense. With growing concern, Jin-tae voiced his worries, stating that the place was completely packed. He feared that not only would they fail to hunt an owl, but they might not even be able to hunt anything that could help them level up. Taking a deep breath, he reminisced about the old days at Changja Portal, where things had been much easier. However, Kong suddenly motioned for him to wait. He picked up a stone, and a notification window appeared, indicating that his throw skill had been activated. Without hesitation, Kong hurled the stone at a tree with incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, an owl fell to the ground. Jin-tae was stunned. How had Kong even spotted the owl? However, Kong himself seemed slightly confused. He hadn't actually seen the creature, but had felt something instead. Rushing over to the injured owl, Jin-tae urged Kong to quickly learn the search skill. Just then, another notification window appeared, displaying the details of the skill. The search skill allowed the user to observe and analyze others, with the range of vision depending on the amount of gathered information. A blue aura shimmered around Kong, and suddenly, he could see his complete information, his name, race, and abilities, including Heart of the Barbarian, Fairy's Blessing, and Ogre Skin. Kong was shocked to see Fairy's Blessing, as it was an unusual trait for a barbarian, who were typically considered enemies of fairies. Curious, Jin-tae asked how he looked through Kang's eyes. Kong, surprised by his enthusiasm, simply replied that there was nothing special about it. Hearing this, Jin-tae's excitement immediately faded. As the two engaged in light-hearted conversation, they were being watched from a nearby tree. Among those observing them were Sergeant Young Soo and Jun Seop. Captain Jun, whose face bore a fresh wound still dripping with blood, was shocked. He had been struck from such a great distance without even realizing it. Sergeant Young Soo, noticing the injury, asked about the blood on his face. That's when Captain Jun finally understood. When Kong had thrown the stone at the owl, it had glanced off and nicked his cheek as well. Trembling from the pain, Captain Jun turned to his team and declared that these two were no ordinary individuals. He ordered his men to recruit Kong and Jin-tae at any cost. However, the sergeant informed him that the two were headed toward Mount Abongson. Hearing this, Captain Jun's expression turned grim. This could lead to a very serious problem. Meanwhile, Kong and Jin-tae stood in the heart of the bandits' territory. Jin-tae hesitated before asking Kong if he was certain that this was indeed the right place. Hidden among the trees, several onlookers watched them and laughed. Among them, an old man remarked on their bravery, noting how fearlessly they had entered the area, especially with Kong carrying such a weapon. Just then, a deep voice interrupted, mocking their foolishness for walking straight into their own demise. The voice belonged to Jang Ho Chul, the leader of the bandits, a man having a trait 3 fingers. With a smirk, he acknowledged Kong and Jin-tae's courage in stepping into his domain. As the two made their way through the breathtaking scenery of Mount Abongson, Kong confidently stated that this was the exact location the blacksmith had mentioned. Yet, despite venturing deep into the mountainous region, there was still no sign of any suspicious individuals. Jin-tae, trailing behind Kong like a frightened child, voiced his growing unease. He asked if Kong was absolutely sure about this mission and reminded him of the dangerous reputation of the local bandits. In response, Kong casually rested his massive axe on his powerful shoulder and reassured Jin-tae with a confident smile, asserting that he could handle any opponent with ease. He emphasized that his weapon was his greatest defense. Suddenly, Kang's sharp instincts detected an incoming threat. A single arrow sliced through the calm mountain air, heading straight for them. Without hesitation, Kong swung his axe and shattered the arrow in one swift motion. Meanwhile, Jin-tae trembled in terror, completely frozen by the unexpected attack. Panic-stricken, he cried out that their enemies had arrived. Within moments, several bandits emerged from the bushes, armed with bows and crossbows. Their menacing presence turned the once tranquil mountain pass into a battlefield. But instead of fear, Kang's face displayed a mix of anger and excitement. Looking up, he noticed the dense fog shrouding the rugged landscape. Then, from the mist, shadowy figures began to appear. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Kong declared that they had walked straight into a carefully planned ambush. Without warning, a rain of arrows poured down upon them. Acting swiftly, Kong ordered Jin-tae to take cover behind him. A system notification suddenly appeared, announcing that Kong had activated his legendary ogre skin, a supernatural defensive ability that granted him skin tougher than steel. Turning to Jin-tae, Kong calmly explained that he needed to escape. But when Jin-tae asked about him, Kong firmly stated that escaping together through the forest was impossible. Turning their backs or revealing their weaknesses would only make the situation worse. At that moment, Jin-tae noticed something unusual on Kang's face and felt a sudden surge of fear. With a trembling voice, he asked if something was wrong, suspecting that the incoming arrows might have been coated with a lethal poison. Although the situation was dire, Kong remained remarkably composed. He casually removed the mysterious object from his face and admitted that, for once, he had been caught off guard. Even his ogre skin, with all its immense strength, could not fully withstand these strategically poisoned projectiles. Kang's nonchalant reaction infuriated Jin-tae. Overwhelmed with frustration, he shouted, demanding how Kong could remain so calm in such a dangerous situation. In a firm voice, Kong told Jin-tae that this battle was far beyond his capabilities. Without wasting another moment, he ordered Jin-tae to leave the dangerous territory immediately. Jin-tae hesitated, fear gripping his entire being. His voice wavered as he stammered, asking if Kong was truly certain about this plan. Kong tightened his grip around his weapon, his expression darkened by intense fury. He turned to Jin-tae and warned him not to look back. With unwavering confidence, he proudly declared himself a fierce barbarian. Without another word, Jin-tae turned and ran. As he disappeared into the distance, he called out to Kong, promising that he would return with help. The battle intensified as the bandits charged straight toward Kong, and he, fully prepared, lunged at them with equal ferocity. Determined to annihilate his opponents completely, Kong, who resembled a towering Hulk, raised his weapon and tore through the bandits, declaring that he would enjoy this even more. That night, he ruthlessly slaughtered every bandit, attacking one after another with relentless brutality. However, his body's color began to change rapidly, and he realized that the poison affecting him was far more potent than he had anticipated. He started losing control over his body, struggling even to maintain basic movements. Suddenly, a bandit attempted to strike him from behind, hoping to finish off a weakened Kong. But with an unbelievably swift swing of his axe, Kong shattered the attacker's skull. With unwavering confidence, he proclaimed that his enemies were not capable of defeating him. The remaining bandits, witnessing the scene, were stunned. Despite the evident effects of the poison, Kong was still standing. One of them yelled, calling him a persistent bastard, and declared his resolve to end him. Kong, battling the crippling effects of the poison, understood that he had to end this fight as quickly as possible. Adopting a monstrous, almost demonic form, he unleashed a devastating attack, wiping out the remaining bandits completely. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Kong knew he had to escape as fast as possible. Without hesitation, he smashed the ground beneath him to create a path and bolted forward at a maddening speed. As he fled, he suddenly realized he had reached the edge of a cliff. There was no way forward. Standing in shock, he found himself facing a massive, deep chasm. At that moment, a chilling laugh echoed behind him. Instinctively, Kong turned to look, A voice sneered, remarking that their prey had surprisingly managed to survive this far. The source of the voice was none other than the bandit leader, Jang Ho. Jang Ho expressed genuine amazement at Kang's remarkable ability to survive. Weak and in an already dire physical condition, Kang confirmed the leader's identity. A thought crossed his mind. Had this entire situation been a carefully laid trap? Jang Ho's smirk, one that resembled a kidnapper eyeing street children, confirmed Kang's suspicions. He then declared that Kang was precisely the kind of prey that made the hunt truly entertaining. Despite his deteriorating condition, Kang maintained a rebellious attitude and began challenging Jang Ho's twisted perspective on hunting. He criticized the leader's underhanded tactics to initiate this fight. Jang Ho merely laughed, mocking Kang's ideals. He explained that the paralyzing poison coursing through Kang's body would soon render him completely helpless. With absolute confidence, he predicted that Kang would soon become nothing more than a walking corpse before ultimately plummeting into the endless abyss below. Kang remained motionless as the poison mercilessly ate away at his body. His vision was growing blurry. Sensing his overwhelming advantage, the bandit leader grinned wickedly and made Kang a final offer. If Kang surrendered everything and pledged allegiance, he might consider sparing his life. However, Kang stood as still and expressionless as a stone, staring into the distance. He listened to the offer with indifference before flashing a sharp, toothy grin. With unwavering pride, he declared that had this been an honorable warrior's duel, he would have gladly staked everything. But as a prideful barbarian, he made an unexpected decision. Without hesitation, Kang leaped into the abyss. As he fell, he boldly declared that he would not let vile men decide his fate. Jang Ho stood frozen in shock, watching in disbelief as Kang plummeted. Midair, Kang made a mocking gesture at the bandits, taunting them with a final smirk. With absolute pride, he proclaimed that they would never take his life. Kang plunged into the deep waters, where skeletons and decaying bodies floated around him. As he sank into the depths, his eyes slowly shut, and a realization dawned upon him. This was the infamous Abongsan Mountain, the one the blacksmith had mentioned before. His consciousness drifted into memories of his childhood, where his younger self had once wondered why, despite diving so deep, he had never seen a single bandit near the cliff's edge. The scene shifted to another memory from his past, where he had questioned whether everything would truly be okay. A new recollection emerged, his father sitting deep within a dense forest. In this moment, a younger Kang had expressed his concern over the rumors about the bandit's strength. His father, exuding confidence, had reassured him that he would never lose to such foes and had advised him to use his axe for protection. Kang found himself troubled by these childhood memories, wondering why his subconscious was clinging to this particular time. Suddenly, a bright light began radiating from his hands. The scene shifted again, and 3 small dragons of different colors appeared, circling around him. He recognized them instantly. These were the same spirits often referred to by the elven race as spirits. However, his system window labeled them as Fairy's Blessing. But Kang knew they were far more than that. For the barbarians, the existence of these spirits was considered a dreadful curse, divine punishment in a way. Yet, these mysterious beings had been with him since birth, constantly hovering around him like a shadow. In his innocent childhood, he had once shared this strange secret with his friends, believing it to be a unique gift. But instead of admiration, the other children had looked at his spirits with disgust, comparing them to the cursed creatures typically associated with the elves. When his secret was exposed to the entire barbarian community, the tribe had immediately planned to burn him alive. This devastating event turned his entire family into enemies of their own people. His parents were forced to abandon their home and everything they had ever known, fleeing with him into the unknown. During their escape, young Kang had clung tightly to his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face as he kept apologizing, blaming himself for their dire situation. He was certain that his very existence had brought misfortune upon them. But despite the fear and exhaustion on her face, his mother had comforted him with love. Kneeling before him, she had gently cupped his tear-streaked face and in a soft yet firm voice had said, "This is not your fault, my son." She had wiped away his tears, explaining that these spirits were an inseparable part of who he was, a unique gift that made him special. She had told him, "They are a part of your identity. Never be ashamed of them, and never reject yourself, no matter how hard things get." With unwavering optimism, She had urged him to stay strong, reminding him that he was loved not just because of the spirits but for everything that made him him. Throughout his life, Kong had constantly denied these mysterious spirits and, in turn, his true self. But now, overwhelmed by emotions, tears welled up in his eyes. He finally understood that these supernatural companions had kept a part of his soul trapped in his childhood. Wiping his tears away, he took the first step toward accepting his inner truth. He realized that staying alive was no longer just a choice. It was a necessity. His family had made the ultimate sacrifice to save him. The spirits continued to swirl around him, and against the backdrop of a magnificent sunrise, Kong sat with newfound determination. He wondered if this place could finally heal the deep, emotional wounds he carried. More than ever, he understood that he needed to gain complete control over both his body and mind. Suddenly, a radiant blue energy enveloped him, surging through his body with an incredible force. He struggled to maintain control over his physical and mental state, enduring the excruciating pain that came with it. The supernatural energy radiating from him was unlike anything before, powerful and untamed. As his consciousness returned to the present, his eyes glowed a deep crimson. He parted his lips, desperately trying to expel the poison from his body. To his astonishment, his body responded naturally, adjusting itself. With remarkable speed, he propelled himself forward through the water, feeling a strange lightness, as if he had been freed from some invisible restraint. As he continued fighting against the lingering effects of the poison, multiple digital notification windows popped up at once. Finally, upon emerging from the water, he received confirmation. He had acquired poison resistance. Taking a moment to process everything, he crouched down and thought, could the power of will truly help one overcome even life and death situations? Then, rising to his full height, a determined yet slightly unstable smile spread across Kang's face. He knew he was now one step closer to becoming a true barbarian warrior. Despite his brief moment of imagination, reality soon hit hard. He was still trapped inside this mysterious cave with no apparent way out. As he turned around, he noticed that a massive boulder was blocking the only visible path. Even in this challenging situation, he sensed a faint cold breeze seeping through a small crack in the rock. Driven by both curiosity and desperation, he gathered all his strength and tried to move the boulder. Inch by inch, as he managed to shift it slightly, he was left completely stunned. Before him lay an unexpected passage, leading into complete darkness. Peering into the depths of the cave's shadows, he saw a horrifying sight. A group performing an eerie and unsettling ritual. At that very moment, a digital notification suddenly popped up, revealing that Kong had accidentally discovered a hidden and unknown dungeon, an abandoned dragon's nest, which had now been overtaken by a ruthless Gnoll tribe. The challenge before him was crystal clear. He had to eliminate the entire Gnoll tribe that had claimed this long-lost dungeon as their own. However, there was a special condition. He had to defeat the Gnoll chieftain in order to claim a unique reward. Standing firm, Kong was momentarily overwhelmed by the discovery of this mysterious dungeon. Yet, in his grip, his magnificent axe gleamed, reflecting his readiness for battle. Cautiously, he assessed the potential threats, each one fueling his anticipation. In this intense moment, a profound thought crossed his mind. Sometimes, the most extraordinary opportunities come only after facing the most dangerous and daunting challenges. Meanwhile, the cowardly Jinte was going through a terrifying chase. A ruthless and fearsome group of bandits was relentlessly pursuing him. Among them, one particularly cruel bandit kept shouting at him, demanding that he stop and surrender, claiming that there was no escape and that they had completely surrounded him. Jinte, who had turned pale with fear and even wet himself in panic, somehow gathered the courage to question the bandit. If he were in the same situation, would he really surrender? Suddenly, a bandit leaped out from the nearby bushes, triumphantly declaring that he had finally caught his prey. He knocked Jinte to the ground and forcefully pressed his face with his entire hand. Then, drawing a long and menacing sword, he announced that he would make full use of Jinte's every possible resource. Jinte, trembling in terror, struggled to breathe, but the bandit's suffocating grip left him utterly helpless. Just then, an arrow, shot with precise aim, struck the bandit, sending him crashing to the ground with a loud thud. In a state of panic and confusion, Jin-tae widened his eyes as he saw two men standing before him, Sergeant Yong and Captain Jun. Still on his knees and shaking, he nervously asked for their identity. Before Yong could respond, Captain Jun quickly signaled that introductions could wait. The atmosphere had now turned into a tense battlefield. The bandits, sensing the arrival of new adversaries, completely surrounded them. Recognizing the imminent danger, Captain Jun, a high-ranking warrior, ordered his team to prepare for battle. Fueled by rage and vengeance, the bandits raised their weapons and charged forward, creating a chaotic and perilous scene. Meanwhile, in another part of the battlefield, Kong stood amidst a horrifying sight. Fallen bodies of monsters scattered all around him. His chest was completely drenched in blood, and a thin trickle of red ran from the corner of his lips. Wiping his face, he tried to steady his breath, but more monsters stood before him, ready to attack. Observing their unnatural behavior, Kong quickly realized that something strange was happening. These creatures kept reappearing, almost like characters in a video game. No matter how many he defeated, their numbers showed no sign of decreasing. This was a clear indication that something mysterious was occurring beneath the surface. Suddenly, the monstrous shadow of a massive creature stretched across the cave walls. This being appeared to be issuing commands to the other monsters. At that moment, Kong understood that they were all part of a larger strategy. Reacting with lightning-fast instincts, he surged forward, cutting down every monster in his path with remarkable agility and strength. Leaping over fallen creatures with precision, Kong finally grasped the true purpose of this dungeon, to defeat the real boss, the Knoll Chieftain 10. The chieftain's appearance was both terrifying and commanding. His glowing red eyes locked onto Kang's, as if accepting the challenge in his determined gaze. Kong felt a surge of excitement. He was facing the leader of the Knoll tribe. Without delay, the Knoll Chieftain let out a deafening roar, activating his supernatural abilities. A massive explosion of fire erupted from his body, surging toward Kong with intense force. But Kong, reacting swiftly, immediately activated his ogre skin defensive ability. Thanks to his incredible resilience, he remained completely unharmed, standing firm like an unshakable warrior. Exuding confidence, Kong taunted the chieftain, remarking that playing with fire wasn't exactly an impressive first move. With unwavering determination, he tightened his grip on his axe, its sharp edge gleaming ominously. His left eye glowed a deep crimson, signaling that he was fully prepared to retaliate. Activating his special throw technique, he infused his weapon with magical energy, dramatically enhancing its power and speed. In an instant, Kong hurled the axe with devastating force and pinpoint accuracy toward the Knoll Chieftain. Sensing the lethal strike, the Monster King instinctively tried to block it with his own weapon. But before he could react, he realized Kong had already closed the distance. With overwhelming strength, Kong delivered a powerful punch straight to the chieftain's face. His expression was fierce and terrifying, filled with an almost supernatural intensity. In a commanding tone, he declared that this was far from over. Summoning incredible force, he slammed the monster to the ground. At the same time, his axe, still entangled with the chieftain's weapon, suddenly broke free. With expert precision, Kong seized his weapon, maintaining his dominant position. Pressing his foot firmly onto the monster's body, he invoked the ancient barbarian traditions and declared that victorious warriors take their enemy's head as a trophy. And in a swift motion, he sliced the chieftain's head off. Just then, a large notification window appeared, announcing that Kong had successfully completed the undisclosed dungeon. The reward details were displayed, and the main prize was revealed, the chieftain's emblem. This remarkable and significant artifact held extraordinary potential. It granted Kong the ability to establish his own tribe and claim dominance over major fortresses in the region. At that moment, he fully realized the magnitude of his achievement. As if that weren't enough, he also received the Guardian Staff, a powerful magical weapon traditionally used by Knoll shamans. It carried the essence of deep guardian magic. Gripping his newly acquired staff tightly, Kong stood with unshakable confidence. A smirk played on his lips as he proudly declared that this powerful artifact was now his, the well-earned trophy of his grueling dungeon conquest. After receiving another notification, Kong learned that he had also obtained the first clear reward. Curious to know what it actually was, he activated the world map. Suddenly, a mysterious tattoo on his arm mat emitted a green glow. As soon as he opened his palm, a holographic map appeared before him. Observing this strange map, Kong noticed that only New Seoul and Abong Mountain were brightly illuminated, while the rest of the locations appeared faded. It seemed the map only displayed places he had previously visited. The vast, unexplored regions left him astonished, sending a thrilling wave of excitement through his adventurous spirit. His expression turned peculiar, almost unsettling, as he realized the incredible opportunities for exploration ahead. The thought of discovering new lands and conquering unknown territories nearly sent him into a state of manic enthusiasm. Just then, a warning notification popped up, stating that the dungeon had been cleared and would soon close. It urged him to escape before the area flooded. As he searched for an exit from the rapidly submerging dungeon, he faced yet another challenge. The cave walls were completely smooth, offering no rocks or grips to assist in climbing. Carefully inspecting the surface, he tried to figure out how to scale these perilous walls. Just as he was about to touch the wall, lost in thought about his limited options, he suddenly heard someone calling his name. Instinctively, Kong shouted back, using the cave's acoustics to reveal his exact location. Moments later, Jin-tae, looking utterly exhausted and timid, appeared at the cave's entrance. The instant Jin-tae saw Kong alive, relief washed over him, and he burst into tears like a child. Shouting down to him, Jin-tae urged Kong to stay put as he was about to lower a rope. Kong glanced at him with pride and smiled, realizing that his companion had truly kept his promise. Once out of the cave, Jin-tae immediately checked on Kang's condition. With unshaken confidence, Kong declared that he felt amazing and playfully invited Jin-tae to witness something interesting. Meanwhile, two soldiers stood nearby, silently observing the scene, uncertain about the direction of this bizarre conversation. At the same time, Young discreetly sought his captain's advice on their next strategic move, now that their presence had been exposed. The captain explained that they had no choice but to follow Kong and Jin-tae. He also revealed that they had received strict orders from their superiors to monitor and ensure the safety of this particular individual. While the soldiers whispered among themselves, discussing their reluctance to be involved in military rumors, they also devised a plan to conceal their true identities. Meanwhile, Jin-tae eagerly pointed toward the soldiers, identifying them as the ones who had previously saved him from the bandits. Kong, acknowledging their timely assistance, gave them a smile of approval. The captain then formally introduced himself as Jun and his sergeant as Young, mentioning that they had known each other since their university days as senior and junior. As Kong activated his unique search technique, his eyes began to glow blue, allowing him to observe and analyze targets with extraordinary precision. Once the analysis was complete, he remarked that the duo seemed remarkably strong. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, whispering among themselves, fearing that Kong might have discovered their true military identities. Kong then turned to face them, his expression still intense, and asked, "Are you here to eliminate the bandits too?" Relieved that their cover hadn't been blown, the soldiers quickly confirmed that they harbored deep hatred for these criminal groups. However, Kang's sharp gaze remained on them, clearly unconvinced. He demanded more details about their supposed grudge against the bandits. The soldiers suddenly found themselves cornered, realizing they hadn't prepared a convincing backstory for this situation. Thinking fast, Young fabricated a tragic story, claiming that his mother had been brutally killed by bandits. Hearing this, Kong calmly crossed his arms and declared Young his brother, expressing sympathy for his loss. Then, unexpectedly, he offered to help Young get revenge, reasoning that after rescuing Jin-tae, assisting Young in his revenge would be a natural next step for a hero. Addressing the captain as brother, Kang's words left him visibly perplexed. The captain hesitated before pointing out that he was 31 years old, implying that the age gap made such a bond unrealistic. However, Kong nonchalantly responded, "I'm 32. This stunned the soldiers completely, as they knew for a fact that Kong was actually much younger, a high school senior. Kong, however, casually reassured them, making a bold promise. He would personally ensure that Jang Ho's severed head was placed on his mother's memorial table. Young, now utterly confused, struggled to react, wondering what Kong truly meant by this disturbingly intense vow of vengeance, especially since there was a chance that his mother might actually be alive somewhere. Kong placed a hand on the sergeant's shoulder and suddenly burst into uncontrolled laughter. Captain thought about his ambition and reputation, noting how remarkable it was that he had returned so quickly to face Jang Ho. However, the captain standing behind him was more concerned about their next move and questioned Kong about their plans. As soon as the captain spoke, Kong spun around furiously, his deep red eyes glowing with anger. Without hesitation, he ordered the captain to address him as brother. The captain was so frightened that he nearly lost control of himself, stammering before quickly correcting himself, calling him Brother Kong, and then nervously repeating his question about their plan. Kong, shifting back to his usual carefree nature, laughed and told them that their first step was to thoroughly search the area and find their enemy's hideout. Clenching his fist, he firmly declared that they would charge in directly and defeat Jang Ho, confidently stating that the plan was absolutely flawless. Just then, the captain hesitantly raised his hand like a small child and asked if he could say something. Kong, addressing Jun as little bro, told him to go ahead. Jun then revealed that there was no need to search. He had already figured out their hideout's location. Pointing toward the mountain, he stated that their main base was on the peak of the fourth ridge to the east. Kong was taken aback. How'd he know this? Turning to the captain, he demanded an explanation. The captain, now wearing a peculiar grin, proudly stated that he had done extensive research for the sake of revenge. Acknowledging this, Kong agreed it was a good idea. Without wasting any time, he declared that they would head straight for the peak. Standing tall, he eagerly pointed forward and commanded, "All right, we attack directly." With that, Kong and his soldiers launched an assault on the bandits, cutting them down with ease as if they were helpless chickens. Amidst the chaos, an archer fired 3 arrows directly at Kong. However, with a single swift motion of his hand, Kong shattered the arrows mid-air, his poison resistance activating instantly. Without hesitation, he swung his weapon, slicing off the archer's head in one clean strike, shouting that such trivial tricks could never be enough to stop him. After the battle, Jin-tae was left in awe, marveling at Kang's resistance ability. Kong, however, merely laughed it off, acting as if it were nothing. On the other hand, the sergeant, still processing what had happened, turned to the captain and muttered that Kong might be a fool, but he was undeniably special. Being able to achieve all this with just his bare hands was nothing short of astonishing. The sergeant then hesitantly asked if, at this rate, Kong could actually defeat Jang Ho. The captain, after a brief pause, replied that if such a thing were to happen, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad outcome. He then went on to explain the region's current situation. 3 military forces were stationed here. New Seoul to the southwest, protected by the military, the bandits of Mount Abong to the northeast, and the horse bandits of the northern wasteland. This explained why the military hadn't been able to wipe out the bandits. Jang Ho's leadership made them incredibly agile and deadly in battle. Moreover, if the army lost too many soldiers, New Seoul would be left vulnerable to the horse bandits. There was also the matter of Major Lee, New Seoul's main pillar of military strength. If he were to fall in battle, it would spell the city's downfall. At that moment, a troubling thought crossed the captain's mind. What if Kong actually did defeat Jang Ho? Before he could dwell on it further, Kong suddenly dropped to his knees with such force that the ground itself seemed to tremble. Jin-tae, alarmed, rushed to his side, asking if he was okay and warning that he was putting too much strain on himself. The captain, equally concerned, repeated the question. Everyone watched in shock as Kang's entire body glowed a deep crimson, almost as if he were burning. Struggling to breathe and visibly shaking from exhaustion, Kong revealed that he had been feeling dizzy ever since activating the stat stone. At that moment, a large red notification window appeared before him, informing him that his abilities had stopped increasing and that the excessive use of the stat stone had caused a system malfunction. Holding his head with one hand and gripping a glowing red crystal in the other, he tried to make sense of what was happening. Aside from dizziness, there didn't seem to be any major effects, but something was clearly wrong. The sergeant, now deeply worried, asked if Kong had absorbed too many stat stones at once, and pressed him to reveal how many he had used. With an awkward chuckle and a slightly embarrassed smile, Kong admitted that he had used about 30. The sergeant's jaw practically dropped in disbelief. Staring at him in shock, he warned that no human could process so many stat stones at once. He explained that not only could the stats fail to apply properly, but Kang's body itself could overload, potentially leading to his death. Panic surged through the sergeant as he urged the captain that they needed to return to the village for medical treatment immediately. However, the captain, still frozen in disbelief, replied with a grim expression. It was already too late. They had already stepped into the bandits' territory. A group of armed bandits suddenly appeared in front of them. Kong, already exhausted and struggling to catch his breath, barely managed to react. One of the bandits pointed at him and mockingly shouted, recognizing him as the big guy who had fallen into a pit earlier. Before the bandit could say anything further, Kong mustered his remaining strength and struck him down with his palm, dismissing him as nothing more than a weak little chick. Using the last of his energy, Kong let out a fierce roar and challenged Jang Ho to come out, declaring that he had come solely for revenge. The soldiers tried their best to restrain Kong, warning him against fighting in his weakened state. Meanwhile, Jang Ho sat nearby, casually cleaning his crooked teeth with a wooden stick, a smug grin on his face. With a mocking tone, he asked who had the audacity to speak the Mountain King's name. Cracking his wrist, Jang Ho flicked the wooden stick aside and started walking toward them. His menacing grin widened as he approached. Despite the dire situation, Kong smirked at him and sarcastically questioned whether he was truly the Mountain King he so proudly claimed to be. Jang Ho's grin stretched even further, clearly entertained. He expressed his surprise at seeing Kong still alive, calling him an interesting man, and promised that this time, he would make sure to kill him properly. Without hesitation, Jang Ho ordered his bandits to attack. As the enemies charged forward, the soldiers fought back with their swords. Seeing the battle unfold, Jang Ho decided to engage Kong personally. Wielding his long-range weapon, he launched an attack, but Kong quickly responded by drawing his axe. Jang Ho smirked and swung his weapon, taunting Kong to try and block it with his pathetic weapon. He sneered, saying Kong wasn't all that bad, then asked if he could really withstand his attacks. Laughing, Kong stepped forward and simply told him to stop talking and fight. And with that, their brutal battle began. Their weapons clashed with such force that the sound echoed throughout the battlefield. Every strike thundered through the air, shaking the ground beneath them. Jang Ho, his face twisted into a devilish grin, attacked aggressively. With a powerful blow, he struck Kong in the chest, sending him staggering backward. The impact was so intense that Kong crashed into a heavy wooden structure and collapsed with a violent thud. Wounded and struggling to stay upright, Kong couldn't help but acknowledge Jang Ho's overwhelming strength and the sheer reach of his attacks, which had given him no openings. But despite the odds, he refused to accept defeat. Gripping his weapon tightly, he pushed himself up and charged at Jang Ho once more. As Jang Ho swung his weapon again with full force, Kong met it head-on with his axe. Their weapons clashed so violently that they locked together, trapping both fighters in a fierce struggle. Then, in a sudden and bold move, Kong flung his axe into the air, causing Jang Ho's weapon to be lifted along with it since they were still tightly intertwined. Taking advantage of this moment, Kong clenched his fists and challenged Jang Ho to fight barehanded. Standing in the midst of the bloody battlefield, his rage-fueled body trembled as he gathered every ounce of his strength for one final, devastating punch. The very air around him seemed to crackle with energy, his clenched fist radiating with an intense glow. But Jang Ho merely smiled and mockingly asked, "What difference will fighting barehanded make?" Spotting an opening on Kang's body, he added, "A mere human body could never defeat me." With that, Jang Ho launched a powerful strike aimed at Kang's arm. But just before impact, Kong activated Ogre's skin and enchanted hide, making his body tougher than steel. As the attack landed, Kong stood firm, his grin revealing that his arm had remained unharmed, aside from a few minor scratches. A green glow shimmered over his hand as he declared, "I am not human." Jang Ho laughed, saying he had already figured that out. "So this is Ogre's skin, huh?" Before he could say anything else, Kong suddenly delivered a swift punch to his face, cutting him off mid-sentence. Yet, despite the direct hit, Jang Ho was completely unfazed. In an instant, he activated his own ogre skin, causing the right side of his face to glow with the same eerie green light. Smirking, he remarked that kids these days never listen to their elders. Kong was stunned. He hadn't expected Jang Ho to possess the same ability as him. Without warning, Jang Ho lunged at him, sneering that there was no need to be so surprised. With brutal force, he delivered a crushing punch to Kang's jaw, sending him soaring through the air. The soldiers watching were completely shocked. Meanwhile, Jin-tae, who was engaged in battle with a bandit, muttered in disbelief that Kong was being completely overpowered. The soldiers found themselves surrounded by bandits. The sergeant suggested that if the situation worsened, they might need to retreat with Kong. but the captain pointed out that there were too many enemies blocking their path. Suddenly, the sergeant turned to the captain and urged him to look in another direction. What they saw left them utterly stunned. Jang Ho had Kong in a tight grip, while Kong cried out in pain. Watching this, the soldiers were filled with shock and disbelief. What was happening? Just as Jin-tae called out to Kong, a bandit suddenly leaped from above to attack him. But before the attack could land, the captain swiftly intervened and knocked the bandit away. However, the bandit merely laughed, stating that resisting was futile. He explained that their boss's final technique, human juicer, had been unleashed, meaning this was the end for them all. Meanwhile, Jang Ho continued mocking Kong, taunting him by asking where all that confidence had gone. Grinning with his golden teeth glinting under the light, he declared that this was the fate of anyone who dared hunt ogres. Just then, a notification appeared, announcing that Overpower had been activated and that the force of a true giant could easily crush stone beneath its feet. Laughing maniacally, Jang Ho bellowed, "I am Jang Ho, the embodiment of strength." As Jang Ho tightened his grip, Kong, despite the strain evident on his face, suddenly let out a laugh. It wasn't just any laugh. It was mocking, as if he was toying with Jang Ho's strength. Furious at the audacity, Jang Ho snarled that he was just pretending to be strong and, without hesitation, applied even more force to his waist. The overwhelming pressure sent waves of pain through Kang's body, the overload effect still lingering. A strange sensation built up in his chest, as if he was about to vomit. Jang Ho kept squeezing harder and harder, until, just like a violently shaken soda being uncapped, the overload that had accumulated due to the stat stones burst out, spewing from his mouth. The sudden release left him feeling light, as if a huge weight had been lifted. A smile crept onto Kang's face as the system's voice rang out, announcing that the overload had been absorbed. Refreshed, Kong commented on how great he felt, but Jang Ho was far from pleased. Calling him arrogant, he tightened his grip once again, this time with enough force to snap a normal person in half. Yet, just as it seemed impossible to break free, his opponent slipped his arm between Jang Ho's, disrupting his hold and forcing him to release his waist. Seizing the opening, Kong grabbed Jang Ho's arm, twisting it into a legendary arm lock. Jang Ho struggled, but it was useless. Kong applied tremendous force until, snap, his bone shattered. A scream of agony tore through the battlefield as Jang Ho clutched his broken arm, his face twisted in pain. The bandits, who had been watching the fight with confidence in their leader, started to waver. Seeing their supposedly unbeatable boss getting overpowered, doubts crept into their minds. Even the captain, who had been skeptical of Kang's chances, now looked on in astonishment. After everything he had endured, he was now the one standing tall. Jang Ho, still clutching his broken arm, cursed through gritted teeth, calling Kong a damned bastard. The humiliation burned worse than the pain. Swearing vengeance, he grabbed a weapon and swung with all his might. His opponent dodged just in time, and the weapon struck the ground with such force that it split apart on impact. But something had changed. Kong, who had been struggling earlier, was now moving effortlessly, dodging each of Jang Ho's attacks with ease. The captain, who had witnessing the brutal fight from the beginning, couldn't believe his eyes. With precise movements, Kong caught Jang Ho's weapon with his left hand and, without hesitation, reached out with his right, wrapping his fingers around Jang Ho's throat. Even with his ogre-like strength and thick, durable skin, Jang Ho couldn't break free. The grip tightened with each second, cutting off his air. Kong wasn't just about choking him, he was lifting him off the ground. Mockery dripped from his voice as he reminded Jang Ho of his earlier claims of being the embodiment of power. Gasping for air, Jang Ho's struggles weakened. In a broken, desperate voice, he begged to be released. Kong, tilting his head slightly, simply commented that's enough revenge for him. And just like that, he loosened his grip, dropping Jang Ho to the ground before he suffocated completely. Jang Ho lay there, gasping, confused as to why he had been spared. But there was no relief, because Kong wasn't done. Picking up Jang Ho's own weapon, he stated plainly that it was time to avenge the mother of Yong-su and the citizens of New Seoul. Jang Ho, still catching his breath, didn't understand at first. But the moment he saw the weapon raised, his eyes widened in horror. Kong didn't hesitate. With a single, devastating strike, he brought the weapon down on Jang Ho's head. The impact sent him flying. He collapsed, knocked out cold, defeated. The battlefield fell silent. The bandits, who had moments ago believed their leader invincible, now stared in shock. Their fighting spirit shattered. Captain Jun, still processing the bandit Jang Ho, was defeated. On top of Jang Ho's body, a ranker's backpack appeared, a sign that he had truly been taken down. The bandits' fear deepened. Their leader, a feared ranker, was gone. Some dropped their weapons, others fell to their knees, pleading for mercy. Kong, however, was unbothered by their pleas. Calmly, he stated that he don't blame them for following a bad leader. Then, wasting no time, he went straight for Jang Ho's spoils. As he grabbed the backpack, something strange happened. Jang Ho's body disappeared. Kang's eyes widened at the sight, but the captain standing nearby simply explained that this was what happened because Jang Ho was strength ranker. Since rankers were classified as monsters, their bodies vanished upon death. Curious, Kong asked how one became a ranker. The captain explained that to earn that title, a person needed at least one of their 5 core stats, strength, agility, perception, health, or magic, to exceed 50 points. Hearing that, Kong immediately checked his own stats and let out a sigh. Not a single one had reached 50 yet. That revelation only made the soldier's shock even worse. Yong-Su, still trying to process it, pointed out that Kong had taken down Jang Ho, a ranker with ogre-like strength, without even being one himself. The captain confirmed that even with the same stats, abilities could vary drastically from person to person, making some warriors far deadlier than others. Before the conversation could go any further, Kong called both of them over. Now that they had avenged Yong-Su's mother, it was time to move forward. He told them they should head down and promised to treat them to some soup. The captain, wearing an odd expression, simply nodded. But in the back of his mind, one thought lingered. Kong had defeated Jang Ho without even reaching his limit. That meant he had already surpassed human limits. As they continued walking, the captain could only sigh, wondering what kind of monster Kong would become in the future. And that wraps up this part. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like. It really helps the channel, and trust me, I definitely need it. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and check out these amazing recaps I've uploaded. I'll be back soon with new and updated parts. Until then, bye-bye.